Thank you for the kind introduction. Newly appointed president and the new committee, congratulations. Distinguished guests, vice chancellor, and members of the MBA Alumni Association. Thanks for the invitation to grace this occasion and talk about a pertinent topic, embracing the agile revolution. I think given what we have gone through in the last couple of months, which has been unprecedented for all of us, this topic really resonates with me, especially someone who just uprooted 15 years of career and living in Singapore and came back to Sri Lanka to serve the country. Took over in March, first week. 2 weeks in, gets into a lockdown. Right? Just being a consultant, you'll have the 100-day plan. You think about what the transformation is going to bring in, how you're going to change everything. And then crisis became my best friend for the next 2.5 months. And there was no better learning. And I would say taking on an organization and learning in and out of an organization. Because crisis gives an opportunity to get to the depths that you would never get to otherwise. But anyway, as you say, you roll with the punches and you make the best of you can. Look, I think if you think about any country who faces with COVID-19 goes through typically 3 phases. First, you have a phase and a stabilizing phase, and then you're in a phase of looking to the future. I mean, Sri Lanka took rapid and decisive decisions, and we've been able to zero out communal transmission since last April. And I don't think we have gotten the due recognition for the country and what all of us have done. Now, as we stabilize, the government has resorted to unprecedented policy response, both on economic front and a good coordination between the monetary and the fiscal policy, as there should be in a time of crisis. But as the recovery gets underway and we look to the future, the shadows of this crisis will still continue to loom. If you think about some of the government's vision, in terms of recognizing an urgency and adapting certain policies, which will strengthen our competitiveness, both in the government and the private sector, and it also will help Sri Lanka to achieve the sustained growth that they look for, and also create jobs, create domestic demand, and most importantly, driving innovation and technology adoption. Now, why am I saying this preamble? Because this is the kind of the context into which the agile revolution kind of steps in, and you can really see full benefits as the country comes out of it. Look, there's no kidding about it. The revenues and the profits are crashing. The cash flows are tighter. If the cost doesn't follow, the consequences are inevitable. You will be faced with the daunting challenge of needing to reduce the cost while continuing to minimize the harm for the key capabilities in an organization. So you really need to think about how do you harness the capabilities, preserve them, but also not impact. But unfortunately, the human capital is one what will suffer. But that's something that you need to manage very carefully. In this light, being agile, reacting quickly to the change and the circumstances will increase organizational resilience. I think everyone knows that. But it's also one thing that will curtail the damage and also allow you to capitalize on it. Now, I will give you one example, and I remember when we went to lockdown, it was Friday evening at 4, I think it was 12. Curfew was announced and everyone was scrambling at the grocery store. We hardly would have, most of it have not ordered any groceries online. And I remember Keel's as an example, their website crashed. They went through a very rapid, agile development process, relaunched their website and created a vibrant delivery platform for people to order. Of course, it was limited 3,000 orders or whatever the number was per outlet. But that was a good example of how a company would have reacted in the face of crisis and use agile to capitalize on things. And don't make no mistake, even in developed countries, in most of the Western developed countries, the adoption of digital or digital transactions have increased by 30%. These are countries who are far ahead from us. And even those countries have seen a rapid adoption of technology. But once people get used to certain things, they are not necessarily going to go back. Of course, there will be some revert to mean, but that would not happen as quickly as we all think. So some of the business models, some of the ways that we used to work will be taken for granted, cannot be taken for granted. So the change will come and we need to adapt. So Agile is a good way for organizations that you all lead to take that charge and drive the change that you need. Now, just a quick raise of hand. I see the energy is coming down and everyone's waiting for the dinner and for me to get out of this stage. How many of you all have used Agile in your organization or have done Agile Squad or some sort of Agile trial? Great. So I see a few hands. So I see there's many more to try Agile. Now I think the Agile can be used in many ways in an organization. I think the way that we think about Agile and it's always like the extreme of Agile, right? Having a squad, breaking down all the problems into small bits of things, and we can all run together and cross-functional teams, everything will work perfectly. But that's not the rosy picture of Agile that we think about. You have to set the stage for Agile to really take root. To be Agile, you would need to reconfigure your organization to small and cross-functional teams, as I talked about. It has to be relatively independent. That means the teams are loosely coupled. Now think about Sri Lankans. You make them independent and loosely coupled, what will happen? Yeah. So we need to have a mechanism to tightly align around purpose. I probably will get some blank stares around why purpose matters. I mean, if you really think about how many of your organizations do have a purpose, so your employees will get out of the bed and say, look, I really need to get to the work today because I am driven for this. So purpose and the strategic priorities, if can be cascaded down in a systematic way, is one way when you embrace Agile or nimble ways of working, if I may say in a layman, that you can bring those people together with a common belief, common vision, or common aspiration. The strong connection of teams with business goals and improvement in both if you connect the teams with business goals, you can improve both efficiency and effectiveness. To successfully transition from Agile operating model, as a business lead needs to focus on 5 areas. So let me just go through one by one. First is smart work. Now during the crisis, we saw an acceleration of smart work. Most of us have probably not gotten to a Zoom call in the past. Remote work was not a common thing. We went into travel restrictions, virtual meetings, and also we figured out that a lot of decisions we used to mull on meetings could be achieved through a couple of emails. Years worth of change has been accelerated in a small time, in a matter of weeks. And the results are here to stay. Smart work has already arrived in many companies, but it will soon be the standard across organizations. So we need to adapt to the world or the world will leave us behind. One of the challenges many will face is the cultural norms, especially in the context of Sri Lanka, and especially in my context, leading a government organization. So still few practical challenges in this smart work exists. Let's not kid around it. We still don't have legality on some of these documentations. Emails are not necessarily considered as a legal proof. Digital signatures, workflows, escalation. You get into an email box and things get lost and nobody knows what happened to the particular piece of work that needs to get done. Escalation, performance management. I think there's so many things that needs to get in before we really think about, well, we are a champion organization driving Agile. But why am I saying this? These are the smaller pieces that you need to think about to get the base right. And of course, on some of these legal things, ICTA and the government's working around the legislation, and hopefully those will come in due course. The second one, for most organizations, is the physical and the mental health. During the crisis, most of the companies implemented effective measures to bring health and hygiene to the next level. Washing our hands, wearing our masks, social distancing, everything. But make sure the mental health and mindfulness also matters. Maybe in Sri Lanka, maybe it's the other way around because everyone has got used to being at home and now coming back to work is a more stressful situation than losing the job. But some of the organization, you may have large staffs, you may have to retrench, or they may have to go through severe salary cuts to keep the entire organization alive. So those create stress, which we don't take into account because with all the other things that's going on, as senior management, you are more focused on keeping the ship afloat rather than each individual, how they're feeling. So do spend time, because some of these things, it's like the ice under the water. You really don't see till it bubbles out. Third one is managing skills and talent. As they say, tomorrow's leaders are being bred in the crucibles of crisis, and many of them at the front lines. So at times, reactive training, I feel the times of reactive training needs are over. We need to create adaptive learning ecosystems. Those organizations that are best able to integrate reflection, learning, and innovation into their daily workflow are responding fastest and for the unforeseen challenges. Now, my earlier firm as BCG, we had a healthy dose of this reflection, feedback, and continuous improvement. A project would last for about 8-9 weeks at best. You would have a thorough evaluation across 6 dimensions, evaluated by your project lead or the principal, managed by the partner, along with a 360 feedback. You have a structured discussion. Every 3 to 6 months, you will have the entire cohort get evaluated and kind of not a forced rank, but you look at relatively how you rank. And that's how the whole performance culture works. Now, of course, in Sri Lanka, what happens, you'll have a performance evaluation end of the year. You decide, okay, right, these are the tasks, and that's probably carried through the full year. Now, that cannot work in an agile environment like what we're going through now. So that whole culture of breaking down this annual feedback cycle and performance evaluation into bite-sized quarterly or semi-annual makes a lot of difference in terms of managing your people development and also getting people to be more cross-functional, cross-trained, if I may say. So I think now more than ever, companies are competing on the rate of learning and how fast the organization employees can absorb change and build capabilities. This will continue to be true to the future. The fourth one about getting agile into an organization is about creating that flexible workforce. Now, most of our organization is very well true for my organization I'm leading too. We are quite department or silo focused. Yes, people rotate around, but very rarely teams work across departments or create projects or create opportunities to work across. Not that people cannot contribute or not that we cannot create an opportunity to do so, but we have not got used to doing so. So I think what I would encourage is for you to be a resilient organization to face a crisis and be agile. Then you need to make sure that your workforce is cross-functional. Right. So someone, for example, in organization should know marketing, also was the finance versus the return of investments, all that aspects. Now, I had that privilege in my career because being in consulting means you work in a different type of project every so often. But how can you create that lower down the organization, not very higher up, because that's when your leaders will emerge. Because if you challenge them and if you put in a different environment, either you sink or swim. But that's not a failure because it's an added experience or an opportunity you give it to the employees to stretch themselves. So I would encourage you to think of cross-functional teams at the lower levels and get them to be innovative, creative, experimental. Your impact to your business is less, but then you will be able to create your future leaders, groom them and nurture them. And mentoring mentoring and coaching is paramount if you want to get this off the ground. The last part is leadership, and leadership with a head, heart, and hand. I'll tell you why. During the crisis, we communicated openly and empathetically with most of your employees, whether it's come to a salary reduction, whether you're working from home, whether you're working long hours, whether your overtime being taken out, you've been communicating with empathetically openly. The leadership will always come from head. Head requires the envisioning, the future, to focus on the priorities, what really matters at a given point, and need to provide the clarity that the organization needs. So the agile starts from you. The heart is the needs about the inspiration. You need to inspire your employees. Then hand needs to ensure the right capabilities are brought together in that rapid working environment, the group to work together. As leaders, lead with empathy and direction. Develop a continuous two-way communication platform. These priorities will bring about the purpose-driven culture within your organization. One that's more resilient than what definitely you had. You simply can't do this with manual systems. So you need to harness digital and digital capabilities. So you can't have a cross-functional team and get them to communicate on email. You need to think about having something like Trello or Slack. I'm not giving endorsement, but those are kind of the tools that allows you to create a task, assign certain activities, monitor them, create an environment to collaborate, or a chat group, I would say, in words, for that particular activity. So you come together, you excel, and you disband. So you need to embrace certain digital technologies if you want to really think about agile in your organization. And let me put a few of these things, the 5 things I talked about, to a little bit more perspective in our investment climate and how things are panning out for BOI. Meaning I mentioned to you that I took over in early March with a lot of aspiration for the organization and a 100-day plan. Now, finally, that 100-day plan is being worked on. That crisis taught me the real leaders, because we have a lot of managers in our organizations, but few leaders. But this is a good opportunity for you to understand who these people are. And their motivations in a crisis situation and why they stepped up were completely different than what I thought why they really did that. So it takes a little bit of time to understand the reasons why people are motivated to step up and do things. So let me talk about a little bit about Sri Lanka and how I'll see BOI and future development of the country. As you know, in 2019, we had about close to $1.5 trillion worth of FDI globally. But 2020, they expect it to go down by 40%. Now that's the numbers we saw in 2005. And here, as a country, we look at for foreign investment to really build certain capabilities and sectors in our country. So that's the kind of the headwind we're going to sail in. Not only that, our neighbors are up in the game. So you've probably seen how Made in India, Invest in India campaigns have been run. Bangladesh is definitely waking up, has created a much vibrant ecosystem in digital perhaps than Sri Lanka. Pakistan, with political stability, they're waking up. So Sri Lanka, we can't continue to do the same thing what we did in the past and expect more FDIs, more investments, everything's to come in. So we had a lofty goal. Last year, we had about 2 billion of investment coming in. So we thought, yeah, we should be able to do it or better than that. First 3-4 months have been good. So we had close to about $600-700 million worth of foreign investment. Of course, the local investors were reinvesting as well. Things are a little bit paused, but of course, the momentum is catching up. Momentum is catching up for a couple of things. Geopolitics. As you rightly see, there's of course a little bit of a blame game going on with the COVID crisis we are facing. But more than that, most of the companies are looking at all their customers are forcing companies to look at and say, do you have supply chain resilience? Are you agile enough to reconfigure your supply chain if another pandemic happens, or a pandemic or any other disaster like this happens in the country or in a region. So a mindset of a global supply chain, a cost-focused supply chain, which drove the mass exodus of industries from developed world into China, Vietnam, India, Sri Lanka, being questioned. So people are looking at saying, look, instead of a global low-cost sourcing, we should have a resilient regional sourcing. So we see some silver lining in the dark clouds. And of course, Sri Lanka continuously comes up to the top of the investors, given our track record, especially given how well we managed COVID. And one thing a lot of people don't talk about is like, even during the COVID period, we had most of our industries running through skeleton staff. EDB, the police, the MOH, the local PHIs, everyone played a role in getting those factories continuing, because we couldn't close some of the factories. We had electronic companies who produce all the ventilator electronics, so on and so forth, right? So if you think about Sri Lanka export basket, we do about 11 billion. And today, if apparel accounts about 5.6 billion, about another billion, give or take, rubber-related products. There's a bit of tea, of course, close to $1 billion. Then we don't have any more other billion-dollar verticals. We've been open economy since 1978. So what do we need to do now? So I think that's where Agile needs to come in my organization, to build these verticals that we need to build for the future generations. So for me, if I look at for this country to go forward, I see a couple of sectors need to be billion or multi-billion. So one sector is pharma. We are heavily dependent on getting our pharmaceuticals from foreign countries. We have the capability. We have the know-how. There are some good local successful companies. So we are trying to build a pharma zone, looking at $1 billion exports over time. It will be a 5, 6, 7 year journey. Unless you try now and you start now, you would not get a chance. And this is a good time because the whole ecosystem is getting moved around. ICT sector, sorry, that I missed out. They actually are about $1 billion. But what should be the number? It could be $3, $4, $5 billion. We are a very innovative nation. I remember there was a tourism campaign saying small wonder. I don't know whether you all remember it. But actually, if you think about technology, ICT, and our innovation, we are a small wonder, which not many people talk about. We have one of the fast electric cars, homegrown, developed. London stock market runs on software that's been developed here. Slintech has the cheapest patent in terms of extracting graphene from graphite, which is going to be the next technology revolution. Many other software companies who power cruise lines, Disney World, and so on and so forth, we hardly talk about them. So in terms of the innovation, the innovativeness, we have the nucleus. We have so many graduates who are coming in who are not probably technology literate. How do we get the workforce trained? One of the buzzwords bus things everyone talks about is there's, I think, 1.5 million three-wheel drivers. But these are school leavers who have a good education, who can be very well trained to be ICT graduate. Now, in that light, I think we have one good example in Sri Lanka, where HCL just came into Sri Lanka. They are creating 1,500 jobs. Now, this is not for BPO. We are known for BPO, but they are saying this is for their service delivery and higher jobs. And they're looking at building a campus and employing 5,000 people. Now, I hope this is the tip of the spear, and many other ICT companies will come in and we'll be able to build another vertical. I would say another vertical that we could think about is fisheries, agri, meaning our country is surrounded by ocean. We haven't really utilized our fisheries resources, aquaculture, which we could do, and agri sector, which we can grow. And even in garments, we still bring all our yarn and threads, most of it, I would say, from China or Bangladesh or India. We could probably manufacture some of these things. Why am I talking about these segments and opportunities and what we are focusing on? What missing, and I think Madam Vice Chancellor, you asked me earlier, and that was a point that I had here, was that what is missing is the entrepreneurship within the country. We are all very comfortable being in a corporate environment and doing a job 3 to 5. This is, you all have a wealth of knowledge. Being an MBA graduates, you have a notch above the rest with your experience, with your knowledge. And what we haven't seen is in this country, people going and really starting businesses. Maybe it's our education, maybe it's our legal systems, maybe it's our risk averseness, maybe it is not access to capital, know-how, whichever it is. But I think if you think about the opportunities that the country or we can create or BOI can create, or the sectors that we can kind of nucleus we can create, there's so much that you group, which is the most valuable resource in this country, which we don't talk about, which is human resource, can contribute in an agile way to benefit. So in my last remark, quoting Rahm Emanuel, he says, never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I meant by it is that opportunity that brings, it's an opportunity that brings to you to do things that you couldn't do before. So really think about this is a crisis, this is an opportunity in disguise. Now, the opportunities we had in terms of bringing the investments that we were trying to bring into the country, we didn't have that before COVID-19. So we just need to be nimble, agile, and pounce upon it. And wish you all the best for the new committee, and for all of you to have that courage, the ability to be agile, and pounce upon the opportunities that you will face in the future. Thank you, and have a great evening.